Are we all having a great time? Yay! My name is Jane PLITT, and I am president of the Library Foundation, and therefore I have the distinct honor to warmly welcome all of you to this exciting event. We're here to celebrate our achievement because of your generosity and the community's response to have raised $100,000. Woo! Amazing. And we did it, we understand, with the hero of the evening, Mr. Stephen King. And you know the story. He actually read a real letter, and he actually agreed to come. He has donated not only his time, but also these incredible, rare, signed Stephen King books that you too can own as a memory of and to support Mr. King, but also to support the Library Foundation. So I encourage you at the end of this program to grab a couple of more raffle tickets, and also to, at the end of the program, buy some of Mr. King's current pre-signed books, Revival, so that you will make him happy and the Library Foundation happy. Because we want to keep Mr. King happy, I have a couple of requests. Please shut off your cell phones. Please, no flash photography so that he gets distracted. Please honor that. And please, no recordings of this event. We are very fortunate that METV is here recording the experience so that the entire community can view and share this exciting event with Mr. King. Although Mr. King is the hero, there is no doubt that once he agreed, we still face the nitty-gritty challenge of raising the needed money. Northern Trust stepped up as the presenting sponsor, and they also underwrote the valet service that many of you have been enjoying tonight so that we could truly experience this with ease. So we do thank Northern Trust very deeply. There are also other people from this community and organizations who step forward. Pier 22 has donated the complimentary dessert bar that we're all going to enjoy after the event. And And many of you heard Mr. Eddie Tobin, who donated his skill as a pianist to entertain us. So thank you, Mr. Tobin. And you saw, all of you who are here because you are generous sponsors. So we do thank the entire group. Hooray for all of you. I need to, however, highlight a few extraordinary people who have made this possible. Now we're here, you know, I represent the Library Foundation, and in 1985, some very wise, caring, visionary citizens banded together to create this foundation to provide the needed supplements, and several of those founders are here tonight. In addition, we have board members who are here who have devoted great time and energy. Over 25 people are the volunteer corps who have made this evening so smooth. And I would ask you to give them a round of applause. And then there was, we needed a sponsor to kick off, to launch this event. I had heard that there was a couple who were very caring about the community. So I wrote them an email out of the blue. And I said, we really could use the kickoff dollars in order to mobilize this community. And Anne and Eugene Beckstein stepped forward. They never met me, and they basically said, the check is in the mail. But they did a little more. I went back to them and said, you know, it's really important that we have students at this event. This is a fundraising, and there will be people who could afford it, but we need to inspire students. And they said, the check is in the mail. So we have 10 students here because of the Beckstein. And as I implied, the Library Foundation is made up of only volunteers. And our treasurer, Paul Lynch, took office just before the Stephen King event. He didn't know that he was giving up his dining room table, all of his free time, when we were trying to cope with the frenzy of incredible response from all of you. So Paul deserves a round of applause. And then there is the event chair, Doris Pope. Mr. King asked us before he agreed whether, if he came, we were up to the challenge of handling a King experience. And we said, absolutely, we have Doris Pope. She is the most dedicated, organized, 6 pages of an Excel spreadsheet was given to each volunteer so that everybody knew exactly where to be. She lassoed in her entire family, and her husband was one of the drivers of the little trolley that may have transported you back and forth. She is extraordinary. You will hear from her later, but could we give her a round of applause? And then, if you're going to have an event like this, you need honorary chairs. There are usually people who bring community credibility. You use their name. You hope they do something for you. We recruited an amazing duo, Sandy and Jim Boyd, who have lived here all their life, who Jim was a library foundation president, and devoted to the cause of bettering this community and library services. They agreed, and we thought, that's nice. And then, suddenly, Jim Boyd is sharing emails with us and strategy and contacts, and then he emails me and says, I got my first sponsor, woohoo! And we knew that we were totally golden. And because of their extraordinary work, this has been a success. So would you warmly greet Jim and Sandy Boyd?
Thank you very much. The best thing I could do is just sit up, or shut up and sit down. But briefly, thank you. Thank you. I knew I had friends in the audience. But Sandy and I are honored and thrilled to be here tonight and to support this wonderful event. Because of your efforts and your contributions, the Manatee County Public Library System is alive and well, and the literacy efforts that are so important to our community and our state will go on. So we could not thank you enough for being here tonight. And Stephen King is in the building. It just doesn't get any bigger than that. And Jane has thanked many that have been responsible for tonight, but I'd like to tell you, Jane PLITT is an amazing, amazing president. We've been involved in a variety of things over the years, and I have never, honestly, ever been involved in an organization and with a group that is so committed, so dedicated, and so energetic as Jane and her team. So this would not have been possible tonight without Jane's tireless efforts, her dedication, and her attention to detail, and actually getting Stephen King here tonight. So Jane, thank you. All hats off to you. But as Jane said, and I'll be quiet because, or we'll be quiet, you want to hear Stephen King, and so do I. But this would not be possible tonight without Northern Trust. Northern Trust stepped up right away to be the presenting sponsor, and because of them, and then the rest of you, we're here tonight. So tonight it's my pleasure to introduce Stephanie GOFORTH, who's the West Florida president for Northern Trust. You know, Northern Trust is a financial powerhouse in our community. Stephanie has from the Tampa Bay area down through Naples and runs the wealth management division as well as the rest of Northern Trust. So her commitment to charities and to organizations like this has been unwavering through her years. She's a tireless advocate for good in our community, and it's our pleasure tonight to welcome Stephanie, who will then introduce the guest of honor, Stephen King. Stephanie, please.
Well, you're almost there. Gosh, you got one more. Good evening. It truly is an honor to introduce tonight's speaker and the renowned author, Stephen King. As presenting sponsor, we thank you for allowing us just a moment to talk about what the community commitment means to us at Northern Trust. We're right in the middle of celebrating our 125th anniversary. And philanthropy has always been one of the major pillars of our company since its founding in 1889. Our corporate social responsibility includes a focus on community affairs, diversity and inclusion, environmental awareness, and socially responsible investing. Northern Trust also supports its employees who volunteer their time, such as in great places like this, and expertise to boards, committees, and causes throughout our area, furthering the efforts of our communities, educational resources, wildlife and educational goals, arts and culture, and most importantly, its people. Stephen and his wife Tabitha epitomize community-based philanthropy through their charitable foundation. Stephen originally created the Stephen and Tabitha King Foundation to help support artists who are unable to work due to health problems, such as he suffered when he was hit by a car while jogging one day. The Stephen and Tabitha King Foundation supports organizations and people who have less access to usual channels of resources. Main areas of focus are poverty, health and human rights, and of course, libraries. Libraries hold a very special place for Stephen since he met his wife there among the stacks of books at Fogler Library at the University of Maine, where they both worked as students. We are grateful for his support tonight and want to thank him for donating his time to this very special occasion surrounding this treasure of a community resource that we have here at the Manatee County Library. Please join me in welcoming Stephen King.
Thank you. I'm sorry about the delay. I was just sitting backstage in the green room getting my picture taken with a cast of a play called The Foursome, which is going on somewhere nearby. I was just sort of hypnotized by all the introductions. Anyway, I want to start by saying that we're not home watching TV tonight, and we're not at a movie, and we're not playing video games. You're here because you read, and you're here to support libraries, so give yourselves a hand. You can even give each other high fives if you want to, but you don't have to. There you go. That's what I'm talking about, is what I'm saying. So I should start off by saying that I'll probably tell some stories that some of you have heard before. And one of the things, I do a benefit like this, I don't take an honorarium because if somebody comes up to me and says, afterwards and says, man, you really sucked tonight, I can say, yes, but I sucked for free. The reason, my wife and I have a foundation, we call it the King Foundation. We try to give something back for all the good things that we've gotten in life. And we're from Maine. We're there 8 months a year, and we're down here in Florida 4 months a year. We started come about 10 years ago. We didn't really want to, but we turned 60 and it's the law. So, you know, Florida, home of the newlywed and the nearly dead. So, what the hell was I talking about? Oh, we're from Maine, we have this foundation, and a lot of the things that we support are libraries because my wife is a novelist, I'm a novelist, my two sons are novelists, and my daughter is a Unitarian Universalist life minister, and that makes her sort of a fiction writer in my view. But this will get back to her, and I'll take so much shit for having said that. But in any case, my wife and I grew up in Maine. Neither one of us came from large families. And we just certainly didn't have any money. And the libraries was a lifeline for my wife, who lived in a little town called Old Town. And I lived way out in the country. I lived way out in the sticks. There was no library at all. And I was hungry for books. I was a 10 or 11-year-old kid, and I was hungry for books. And once every month in the summer, this wonderful big green truck came to my little town and parked on the dirt road outside the one-room school where I went to school until I was in the 8th grade. And that was called the Bookmobile. And when you went inside, it was like being inside a library, and it brought brand new books, best-selling books, to people who would otherwise have no access to them at all. And that's where I discovered Ed McBain, Evan Hunter, John D. McDonald, Sarasota resident there, and a lot of other people. So that was a lifeline for me. So in a way, what this is for me is paying dues. It's just one of the things that you do to get back square, so that at the end of it all, when you face the big fella up there, you can say, well, I did do something. You know, so anyway, that's one of the things. But I just, in November, I was on tour for a new book called Revival. which I signed a bunch of copies that are going to be passed out tonight, and I ought to say that they make wonderful presents if you should want to buy another one and give one away. But I was on this tour, and I heard three things over and over and over again on this tour. People would come up to me and say, "You're a lot bigger than I thought you were." And I would say, "Well, those book covers are only about that big, so yes, I am a little bit bigger." But the other thing that I would hear, and I did really, dozens and dozens of times from people, they would say, "Oh boy, now I can scratch this one off my bucket list." Bucket list. That's a really creepy fucking thing to say. And I mean, the only thing that's on mine is not kicking it tonight, you know? Otherwise, I mean, but really, think about it. You could say, my bucket list, I want to see the Grand Canyon. I want to do, you know, the Virgin thing where you go around the world in a spacecraft or something like that. But to see Stephen King at a signing on your bucket list. And the other thing that I would hear, and I'm, you know, if I'm lying, I'm dying. Of course, we all are all the time, but that's another thing. People would come up and say, "You scare the hell out of me." And then, no, wait. They would say, "You scare the hell out of me. Can I have a hug?" And I listened to that, and I realized that at some point in my career, I became America's most loved boogeyman. And you've got to admit, that's a pretty weird job to have. I mean, that's a one of a kind, but Alfred Hitchcock died, and Boris Karloff died, Rod Serling died, and that left me. So was it. And I've become sort of like the girl who lives across the tracks in the trailer park. I've gotten a reputation, you know. It's this scary guy. Now, down here, we live in the Sarasota area, and I'm allowed to shop in midweek at Publix for things that aren't important. My wife does the actual shopping. But if she needs something that's not too difficult for a guy to go buy, she sends me to Publix to buy stuff. So we needed a spatula and we needed some orange juice, and she felt that I could handle that. So this was 2 years ago. She sent me to Publix, and I've told this story quite a few times, and I'm sure some of you have heard it, but screw it, I'm going to tell it again. Because my wife likes to say, with Steve, a story never loses its savor. And that's true. I mean, it's true. So I'm in Publix, and I'm there to get orange juice and a spatula, and I come up the aisle where they have the housewares. I call it the aisle because it's got all this useful shit that at some point you want, spatulas and drainers and these gadgets that you don't even know what they're for, but you want to buy them. You want to buy them. And this woman comes around the far end of the aisle, and she was a Florida special, a snowbird, you know, just tanned to the color of leather and, you know, 80, 85 years old, the perfect white hair and everything. And she looked at me, and she looked away, and then she did a double take, and she said, "I know you. You're Stephen King. You write those scary things. And that's all right for some people. Some people like those scary things. I don't understand why. I don't like those scary things." She said, "I like uplifting things like that Shawshank Redemption." And I said, "I wrote that." And she said, "No, you didn't." So you get that reputation. You get that reputation. So here's the thing. When I do interviews, I get one, well, you get a couple of questions over and over again. One is, where do you get your ideas? Talk a little bit about that in a minute. Not that there's any very satisfactory answer to it, which makes it worth passing the time with. But, you know, every interviewer, and there was an interview in Rolling Stone a little while ago, and sooner or later somebody will say in this kind of casual way, what were you like as a kid? Which is a code way of asking what f***ed you up so bad that you're doing this. See, you can't get away from it. I mean, it's the psychological approach. It's the Dr. Hannibal Lecter approach to journalism. Because really, I had a very ordinary childhood. I had a very pleasant, ordinary childhood. But of course, I would say that. Anyway. No, I did. My brother and I were raised by a single parent. Our mom, we were latchkey kids before there were latchkey kids. And we grew up out in the country, and we had the usual friends. And my brother and I were both readers. And at some point along the way, I decided that I wanted to be a writer. So I started to type up stories on an old typewriter that I had, and I started to send them to magazines. And I pounded a nail into the wall, and I'd get the rejection slips back, and I would put them on that nail. And around the time that I turned 17 or 18, the nail fell out of the wall because there were so many rejection slips on it. So I got a bigger nail. And if there's any secret that I know to success, it's if you don't succeed, get a bigger nail. So that's what I did, and it worked out. And eventually I started to sell a bunch of short stories to magazines that don't exist anymore, because you can get all that stuff on the internet now. But there were these magazines called Dude and Gent and Cavalier and Adam and Night. And they were the sort of magazines, if you turn them sideways, a gatefold fell out of them. But they paid actual money, and I was working first in a laundry, and then I got a job teaching school for the princely sum of $6,400 a year. My wife and I married young, had kids young, so we were stupid, it happens. And those checks came in handy. $200 here, $300 there. And of course I was very proud, and I wanted my mother to see my published stories. And my wife came up with this beautiful gimmick, because she would photocopy them, because she worked in the Faulkner Library at the University of Maine. And she would put strips of blacking over the ads for the X-rated movies and the dating sites and all the rest of it. And I sent them off to my mother, and she was always pleased, and she would always say, "What magazine was that in?" And I'd say, "Well, actually, Mom, it's in one of those men's magazines, but it buys penicillin for the baby's ear infection," and she liked that. So I started to write novels, and I was not successful at first. And I had a wonderful idea for a book when I was teaching school. And it was February vacation. I had 1 week, and I wrote this novel in 1 week, because 1 week was what I had. And I decided that I would call it The Running Man. And I sent it off to a science fiction publisher who did paperback originals, and actually got back a note that said, "There is no market for dystopian fantasies." And I thought about that a couple of years ago when The Hunger Games and all these other books came up, and I thought, bullshit, there's no market for dystopian fantasies. I was ahead of my time with that. So it was eventually published under the name Richard Bachman, along with some other books. So it all worked out eventually, and I did sell my first novel, Carrie, and the advance was $2,500, which came in very handy because we had a very old car, my wife and I, and we were able to trade it for a Ford Pinto, and later found out that they explode. But it was a new car, so what the heck. And that's the life that I expected. This is what I'm getting at. That was the life I expected. I expected to be a writer. I wanted to make enough money to support my family and be able to do it full time. So that would have been enough for me. And at some point, this thing happened, this best loved American boogeyman thing or whatever happened. And writers are supposed to be secret agents. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to go into situations, look, see, go back and write. And at some point in the 80s, people began to recognize me. I think because I'd done some cameos in movies, and then my agent talked me into doing an American Express ad where I stood in a drafty castle in a tuxedo with a stuffed bird on my arm. Stupidest I ever did. But in any case, people started to recognize me, and I would be walking down the street and somebody would say, "Hey, wait a minute, do I know you?" And I'd say, "Well, I don't know." Guy'd say, "I do, you're Steven Spielberg." And I'd say, "That's right, you know. Yeah, I'm 5.5 feet tall, a Jewish filmmaker from California, just bopping around here somewhere on the East Coast." But I used to, they sent me on a book tour for the first time, Doubleday did. I'd written a novel called The Shining, and they said, "You're going to go do 8 cities in 7 days." And I said, okay. And at that time, the things changed a lot now, but in those days, the idea was that you went, you did as much TV as you could. There was always an AM show and a PM show and the news, and there was some kind of a press dinner, but this was back when newspapers actually had some money, you know. So I'm in Pittsburgh, and I do the whole thing. I was there with Jerzy Kosinski and Kitty Kiley, who wrote the books about Sinatra and all that. Great people. And we're like road warriors there. So I did AM Pittsburgh, and I did a bunch of press, and the last thing was the press dinner. And it was up on a hill in Pittsburgh, and, you know, we went and we ate. And this part of the story, I have to be careful. I don't really want to, well, what the hell, I guess I do want to offend people, or I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. Let's put it this way. I got sick, and everything fell out one end or the other. And there was no easy way down from this restaurant because you got up there on a cog railway. So it was a fancy restaurant, and it was the last city of the tour, and I was homesick from my wife and my children, and I was feeling pretty darn sorry for myself, and I had to run for the restroom again, and this restroom was as fancy as the rest of the restaurant. It was like Babylonian. It was like marble on the floor, and, you know, there was an attendant. He was this man who was about 800 years old, a little white coat and everything. The only thing it didn't have was any doors on the stalls. But I was beyond caring about such things. You know, I would go in there, and it was the low point, let's put it that way, in many ways. You know, when your pants are around your ankles, it's always a low point. But it got worse because the 800-year-old washroom attendant is walking toward me as I sit there with my pants around my ankles, and he said, "You're Stephen King. I saw you on AM Pittsburgh. Can I have your autograph?" So I signed the autograph, and that's when I started to realize that this fame business was really not what it was cracked up to be. And the thing is, you're wrong to try to enjoy it because God always gets you. I was in Nathan's not too long after that in New York City. You know Nathan's hot dogs? And I was sitting at the counter. Yeah, here you go. And I'm chowing down on a hot dog with some sauerkraut and all the rest of it. And this was quite a while ago, and I was, you know, my hair was pretty long. I had a beard. It was a big black beard, and the mustard was in it and everything. But I was wiping it off and having a great time. And I look up through the pass-through to the kitchen, and the cook is looking at me. And as soon as he sees me looking at him, he's like, back cooking, back cooking. But when I look up again, he's looking at me again. I'm thinking, he's a fan. And pretty soon, he comes around, you know, and he comes around, and he says, are you somebody? And I say, well, yeah, everybody's somebody. He says, no, are you somebody famous? And I'm like, well, sort of. He says, are you Francis Ford Coppola? And I said, yes, I am. And I signed him an autograph on a napkin because I didn't have the heart, man. I did not have the heart to... Anyway, I was going to talk about where the ideas come from because, geez, I had no idea that I would run off at the mouth so long. But the fact is, the ideas come from everywhere, and there's no... I used to kid people and say, oh, well, there's a little idea shop in Utica, secondhand used ideas. But there's a moment where there are two separate things in your mind, and then there's a moment where they come together. And that's why I do this job. This is why I still do this job. Frankly, I don't need the money, at least not today, and I certainly don't ever need to sign another book. Not that I'm actually mind it. And, you know, I made a deal with myself a long time ago, said, if I ever sign a book where I can't read my own signature, I'm quitting this shit. But so far, I still can, so that part's okay. I do it because there's that moment where the ideas come together and you say, I really have to write this. I really need to write this. And I don't want to run on until fatigue sets in, but I will tell you this. I was on a plane with my wife and kids. We were going to England for a holiday, and it was a long flight, and I fell asleep on the plane. I don't sleep well on planes. Mostly I have to be awake and terrified because that holds the plane up. Some of you understand that. There's one of us on every plane that doesn't crash, okay? We're like the air marshals of the apocalypse. We hold the plane up with our terror. Planes that crash, everybody's like totally blasé. That's the problem right there. And you accuse me of magical thinking. But anyway, I fell asleep on this plane, just a little doze, a light doze. And in it, I saw myself immobilized in bed, and someone was saying, I'm your #1 fan. And I woke up and I said, I want to write that story. And right away, before I got off the plane, I knew that the woman who was saying that was a woman named Annie Wilkes, and that the writer was going to be a stand-in for me. And I thought it would be a short story called The Annie Wilkes Edition. That was the title that was on the original manuscript. And I thought to myself, she's going to have a pet pig that's named after this guy's most favorite character. And after he writes a book, she is going to bind that book in the pig's skin. And then I thought, well, maybe in his skin. I don't know. It didn't really matter, but I wanted to write it. And I couldn't wait. I was on fire. And we were at this hotel, Brown's Hotel in London. And I was jet lagged out of my mind. I couldn't sleep anyway. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm thinking, I'm bright-eyed. So I go to the desk and I say, do you have a place where I could sit down and write? And they said, oh, there's a beautiful desk on the landing on the second floor, this beautiful desk, and it was. And I sat there and I drank like 3 pots of tea, and I wrote the first 3 chapters of that book that ended up to be called Misery. And, oh man, thank you. It's like Steve King's greatest hits, isn't it? Kind of. Play Free Bird. So anyway, I'm writing away and just on fire at this beautiful, beautiful desk. And I did everything that I could do, and I felt like I could sleep. And I went down to the desk, the front desk, and I said, "Thank you so much. That was really wonderful, and what a gorgeous desk." And the guy said, I can't do the British accent. He said, "It is, sir, isn't it? It was Rudyard Kipling's desk. He died of a brain embolism writing at it." But I didn't let that stop me. I went on anyway. So anyway, but what I'm driving at here is that there's a mystery about this job. And the simple fact is, the man, presumably you're here because you've read some of my books and you like them, but the man who wrote those books, who's writing a book now, is not here because he doesn't do public, okay? He just does not do that. He sends me instead, and I talk, and I tell stories, and I try to be a little bit funny, and it's all a process of deflection. When I'm occasionally when I teach, when I try to teach writing, I contend with you that writing can be learned, but it can't exactly be taught. But on the other hand, there are a lot of writers out there who are not able to quite make ends meet with their fiction, with their stories. And so if they get jobs teaching writing classes, I say go with God. But I'm not sure it can be taught. But there is somebody inside who does that job, and he just never comes out in public. I don't do it because I necessarily need to, but because I want to. I do it because I can, and I think that it's a great privilege. And here's the thing, okay? I love these jokes where something walks into a bar, okay? I love those jokes. Always makes me think of this routine that Bobcat Goldthwait used to have. He'd say, "A monkey and a leopard and an elephant walk into a bar together. If you actually saw that, your head would explode." You know? But I love those jokes anyway. And there's the one where the horse walks into the bar and the bartender says, "Why the long face?" But I was telling this particular joke because it kind of summarizes the whole sort of mysterious act of writing stories. There's a joke where 2 jumper cables walk into a bar, and if you're a reader, you want the punchline. If you're a writer, you say to yourself, "Holy shit, how does a jumper cable do that? I got to think about that and then maybe write it up." So to me, that's the difference. 2 jumper cables walk into a bar, and the bartender says, "Well, all right, I'll serve you, but don't start anything." But that isn't the important part. Well, it is if you're a reader, and I'm a reader as well as a writer. But what I really want to think about are those feet. And so far, nothing has come up. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes that doesn't happen. I told this before, too. I had a wonderful idea back in the 70s. I think I keep telling this story because I don't want to let this go. I had the idea for this story called The Ladies' Room. And it was going to be set in an airport. And this guy and this woman are hurrying to catch their flight. They're going to someplace romantic like Cancun. And the woman says, "Just a minute, honey, I got to use the ladies' room." And so she goes in the ladies' room, and he's waiting outside. And another guy comes up with his wife, and she goes in to use the ladies' room, and the guys are standing out there the way guys do in a situation like that. You know, you're just kind of waiting for the lady to finish tinkling, you know, so that you can go do it. So pretty soon this guy comes along with his daughter, and she says, "Daddy, I got to use the ladies' room." And she goes in, and none of them come out. And there's more and more guys. And I was fetched by the idea of what a chain reaction this would be. It would start with this one guy waiting outside the ladies' room. So pretty soon, all these men are waiting, and there's nobody coming out. And so they get a female security guard to go in and see what the hell is going on in there. And she goes in, and she starts to call, "Is so-and-so here?" And just as the door shuts, she begins to scream. They hear the scream, and then the door shuts. So then, you know, a couple of big burly guys come in, you know, and they disappear, and they don't come out. So I could see this chain about how it was going to go to the airport police, and then the local police, the state police, the militia would get involved. Pretty soon it would be this thing, you know, where all these people are going in and nobody's coming out. I love that idea, but I could never figure out what the was going on in there, so I have made that story work for me by telling it at places like this, but beyond that, you know, not that much. Listen, before I call Doris up here, she's got some questions from the audience. I want to point out a couple of things. Well, actually, I want to say hi. Charles Schlatter, where are you? Are you here? Where are you, man? He wrote a great story. The reason he's in the front row here is the guy wrote a great story. 250 words, and it's pretty much all there. The only one I can think of shorter that might be a little bit better was by Ernest Hemingway. He and a bunch of his friends had a writing contest to see who could write the shortest short story, and Hemingway's was "A sign in a thrift shop window, baby shoes, only used once." But not a bad story right there. I mean, it's sort of like the whole thing. The other thing is I wanted to, you know, kind of give a shout out to all those kids that are here who had the ideas for the Library of the Future and innovations and all that. It's terrific stuff. I saw some of those. It's a great thing. And one last thing before I let you go, and that is, it's a public service announcement, really. So, Allstate says that, you know, we're all having fun here together, you know, because the lights are on and stuff, and we're in a crowd. We're safe. But Allstate says that 1 in 50 people who come to public events forgets to lock their car. And so I want you to check that when you leave, because you'd hate to, I don't want to scare you. But what I wouldn't want is for you to be driving home on one of these empty roads and see a face rise up in the rearview mirror. But, and the same statistics say that 1 in every 250 people who come to public events will forget to lock their house. And I would be the last person to suggest that a crazy person might be in your house right now. And we can all laugh about it because we're all together. It's going to be different later on when you're on your own. Boy, I'll tell you. And you know where they go? The shower. So if you get back, the first thing you're going to want to do is go to the bathroom, and hopefully you'll be one of those people that has sort of a transparent or semi-transparent shower curtain. But if you don't, Now, this is not to worry you or scare you or anything like that. And I'm sure that there's nobody in there, but it happens, man. So be careful. Let's see if you have any questions. Doris, do you want to come up here? Thank you. Thank you. Fantastic.
Of course, you're forcing me to put my glasses on in public.
Here they go.
Okay, here they are. Mr. King asked that I read him some questions from the boxes that you all filled out, or from the cards you filled out and put in the boxes. The first one that caught my attention goes a little bit along with what he's been talking about tonight, children. These are questions from my 4th grade class. We would love to have you visit our school in Tampa and tell us about your writing process. So would you?
No.
Okay, so how do I follow that? Well, I'm going to read you some of the questions, and you can decide how you're going to answer them, okay? Okay, this is from Corsica.
But make sure your final answer is in the form of a question.
What made you become an author?
I'm sorry?
What made you become an author? And I'll read all 3 of them, okay? What is your favorite book you have wrote? And who is your favorite author?
Well, what made me become a writer is just, I always wanted to be one. I mean, I think it comes with the original equipment. I think there's something inside. It's like, you know, I reviewed a book for the New York Times a few months ago about Jerry Lee Lewis, the great rock and roll pianist. And he said that when he was 4 years old, he went to his aunt's house and he saw a piano. He said, I didn't even know what it was, but I knew I had to get at it. And that's sort of the way that I felt. Of my books, I think in some ways my favorite is either It or 11/22/63. It really is like the Eagles' greatest hits, isn't it? It's wonderful. And the other question was, don't tell me. Oh, my favorite.
Who's your favorite?
My favorite authors. Well, I love that book, Gone Girl, by Gillian Flynn. I thought that was a very clever piece of work, and I loved it. I think my favorite book of all time is The Lord of the Flies by William Golding. If there was a book that made me want to be a writer, it was that one. And I loved Golding said to his wife before he wrote the book, he was sitting in front of the fireplace with his wife one night, and he said, what would you think, dear, if I were to write a book about boys? Not boys like in a boy's adventure book, but the way boys really are. And she said, I think that would be a fine idea. So I love that book.
Great. This is a rather long question. Do you have people give you ideas to write on? Do you do it all by yourself, besides the editor at the end, and illustrator? Also, does the illustrator draw while you're writing the book? From Ellie.
Well, that's a good question, but I don't think, with one exception, none of the books are illustrated. I did a book called The Green Mile that was released in, thank you, it was released in chapters, and there was a guy who did interior illustrations for each of those that ended up in the final book. But I'm pretty much a lone wolf when it comes to this thing. I've been very fortunate that I don't have to run ideas by an editor. I can sit down and write, and when something's done, I pass it along, and I've been fortunate that people have decided that they want to publish what I write. But in terms of the editing question, let me just say that, you know how they say a lawyer who defends himself has a fool for a client? Well, a writer who won't take an editor's advice is a fool, period. and he has a fool for a client, I guess you'd say. But I always smile. I've written a lot of long books, you know. This reminds me of something a reviewer said about James Michener. Michener wrote a huge book called Centennial. And the reviewer said, I have two pieces of advice about this book. The first is, don't read it. The second is, if you do read it, don't drop it on your foot. And I've written some books like that were big doorstops of a book. And a lot of times the editor, the reviews will say, well, this would have been a pretty good book if it had had an editor. You know, snark, snark. But they don't see behind the scenes. One of the long books is called Under the Dome. And the manuscript was about 2,000 pages long, but the editor took the steam out of that hot dog.
Well, that follows along with a question from Isabella. How long does it take you to write a book? And she drew a picture of one in case you're not familiar with it.
Yeah. Isabella drew a book. It's very nice. How long does it take you to write a book? You know, you work along until the book is done, that's all. I'm a fast worker, and the reason I'm a fast worker is because I'm afraid that if I slow down and give myself too much of a chance to think, that I'll decide that what I'm doing is crap and it doesn't make any sense. I don't have the world's best self-image, frankly. I'm a little bit puzzled by the success that I've had, and a lot of times when I'm in a group like this, I feel an outpouring of affection that's wonderful, and at the same time, I always feel a little bit like an imposter, like you can't possibly want to come and listen to my stuff. But so the idea is to keep it fresh and not pay too much attention to my own insecurities or whatever they are. And the result is that in most cases, a book should take about 5 months to write a first draft. I usually, people say, how many words do you write a day? And I don't really keep a word count, but what I try to do is to get 6 pages of finished copy to my manuscript. Because I always say to myself, if I get 6 pages a day, I'll have 600 pages in 100 days. 100 days, only a little more than 3 months. That's not bad, you know, if you stick to it. So, and you take it a day at a time and try not to get too overwhelmed. Because in a way, you know, Dorothy Parker said writing a novel is like trying to cross the Atlantic in a bathtub. And there's some truth to that. It's a little bit daunting if you think about it too much. So I'm going to say the average for first draft would be about 5 months, but then you have to write it again because the first draft is all about the story, and then at some point you say to yourself, here, I spent this time writing this. Why did I bother? What was really on my mind? And if you read a manuscript over with that in the forefront of your mind, you see certain elements that are, you know, recurring again and again. You see patterns and you try to enhance those and make them a little bit clearer. So you come out with something that vaguely resembles a theme. Then it goes to an editor. So the whole process probably takes a year and a half. And by the time you're done, it's a little bit like you ate pot roast 9 days in a row.
This is a local question. Have you ever swam with the manatees at Nokomis Beach?
No. But I've seen manatees, and then I was going to make a Henny Youngman joke, but I'm not going to do it.
Thank you for all my sleepless nights. Please tell me if you plan to see Roland again.
Yes. Talking about Roland from the Dark Tower, and all I can say is the Dark Tower never really leaves. It's kind of the binding force of a lot of these stories. And There's a book coming out in the fall of this year. It's a big collection of stories called The Bazaar of Bad Dreams. And there's a story in there that's called U-R. And it's a revision of a story that was published in a limited as a Kindle ebook a couple of years ago, but that's a real balls to the wall Dark Tower story. So Roland is still there, I guess.
That will make a lot of people here tonight very happy. This is the last question, and I think it's very, very appropriate. What scares Stephen King?
That's sort of like asking who cuts the barber's hair, isn't it? No, actually, there are a lot of things that that scare me. There are, you know, the idea that somebody might be in the back of my car when I go home. And by the way, those statistics that I told you about are total. But the idea of all fiction is to try to make the thing seem as realistic as possible. I think that, you know, talking in front of large groups of people, that's kind of a terrifying thing. I got to tell you something that happened the other day. I really do. I have to tell you this. Because it scared me, okay? My wife and I have a brand new puppy. We have a little corgi puppy named Molly. She's 3 months old, and she gets up like before God in the morning. And so we're trying to toilet train Molly, and it was, I think it was Saturday, and it was early, the sun wasn't up. Well, how could it be? It was like 4 o'clock in the morning. And the wind was blowing like hell, and I take Molly out into the driveway, and there's a brick wall that runs, a concrete wall that runs along the side of the driveway. And Molly gets really interested in something, and she approaches it, and then she jinks away, and then she starts to go back again. And I look, I had a flashlight, but it was, the batteries were all weak. It was just this little dim yellow glow. And at first I thought it was a piece of paper fluttering around, except that it was kept sort of coming toward her, and she would jink away from it. And so I bent a little closer, and holy God, I thought it was a spider as big as my hand, this pale spider. And I'm like, I got to get the dog away from it. It might be poison, but there was a sort of an atavistic moment there where I didn't care about the dog or anything. It's just that, you know, all at once your testicles try to crawl back into your body. The hair stands up on the back of your neck, everything. It's this total atavistic reaction to the idea that you're looking at a spider, the biggest spider you ever saw that wasn't in National Geographic magazine. And so then I noticed something about the movement, and I looked a little closer. It was a crab. It was a crab. So what scares Stephen King? Crabs at 4 o'clock in the morning. Thank you all so much. Can I turn it back on?
Very good. Okay.
I can turn you on.
My husband's in the audience. Mr. King.
Steve.
Steve, thank you so much. On behalf of the Library Foundation, I want to thank you again for your generosity of time and talent. You have been terrific tonight. Thank you. To show our appreciation for Mr. King's support, we have some gifts that we would like to give him. So if you will stand by for just a second, I'll get the gift givers.
You give me presents, I'll stand here.
All right. Presenting these gifts, we want to welcome back to the stage Representative Jim Boyd, Honorary Chair of this event, and Sherry Corrier, County Director of Neighborhood Services, which includes all of our libraries.
What an evening, huh? Wow. You know, we all knew you were an incredible author. We had no idea what a comedian you were as well. Thank you very much.
Just ask my wife, she'll tell you.
Mr. King, on behalf of the Florida House of Representatives, it's my honor to offer you a tribute, just to recognize the incredible impact you've had on the literary world. We're so proud you're a part-time Floridian. You realize we talked in the green room, no politics, but we don't have a state income tax here, so you're welcome to move here full-time if you like. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, that's wonderful. Mr. King, we are so honored to have you here. And on behalf of the Manatee County Board of County Commissioners, I'm here to say thank you. We have some gifts for you. We heard that you had some favorite things, so we tried to rustle those up. And we just want to tell you how much the community and all of you, we want to thank every single person in the audience for bringing this wonderful opportunity to the community, and your public library system won't let you down. We'll make it work. And so we heard that a girl from the county walked into a bar. Yeah. And she found some Rays and Boston Red Sox tickets because she heard that those were your favorite. And Northern Trust, our wonderful sponsor again, donated these tickets for the Tampa Bay Stadium. Also, she found in there tickets for the Pittsburgh Pirates, donated by the Pirates to see the Red Sox game. While she was in the bar, a few other things she heard was that you liked blues. And so our own very own Realize Bradenton contributed 3 Blues Festival t-shirts for you. So you have to do laundry for at least 3 days. And then our favorite, the Library Foundation, donated to you, and Doris is going to show you all, an I Geek Libraries t-shirt right from your Manatee County Library. And lastly, while this young lady was in the bar, she heard from a guy that your favorite author was John MacDonald. And so in this basket is a biography signed by John MacDonald, and we can't thank you enough.
So, thank you, Mr. King.